What's good, everybody? Welcome to Whole Views. Thank you for clicking that thumbnail. My name is Corey, and today we're going to be doing my top 3 favorite castings of James Gunn's DC universe. So, if you saw the thumbnail, you know that there are a multitude of casting announcements that have already taken place. And I'm here to talk about my top 3. Now, when I say my top 3, I want to be clear. I don't really love all the casting for James Gunn's DC universe. Like, the idea that we are getting a much different version of all these characters, and it appears as though everybody's going to be established. It makes me wonder about character development that we're going to get. It makes me wonder about how are these characters are going to be portrayed. But just looking at the actors chosen to play the versions of the characters that they're playing, I'm kind of intrigued and really impressed by 3. We're going to start off with Edie as Mr. Terrific. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I do know his first name is Edie. And so I really enjoyed that actor. I think that he really got done wrong in X-Men First Class, and I'm really excited to see him jump back into a superhero universe. I also really like the character of Mr. Terrific. I feel like the Arrow universe did that character wrong. I think the cartoon and animated films have always gotten that character right. So what I'm really hoping is that we can get a very serious tone from Edie and have him play the Mr. Terrific in live action that's more akin to what we see in the animated stuff, because I like him in all the animated portrayals. I haven't liked him in live action because he only had one portrayal thus far. So hopefully we get a really good version of that character from Edie and James Gunn. Second one on the list would have to be Nanjanali as Booster Gold. Now listen, I don't know how to say his name great either, but I do like that actor being chose to play the role of Booster Gold for a couple of really weird reasons. So Booster Gold comes from the 25th century, and I feel like if you go that far in the future, I can't imagine white people being the majority across the world. And that's kind of a weird statement to make, but if you just look at population trends over time, it kind of makes sense that Booster Gold might be brown, because there's going to be more brown people across the world by the time we get there. And if not straight brown people, it's going to be like a mixture of something. So for him to have a shade of brown to him kind of makes sense to me. Now in the comics, Booster Gold is described as a shameless self-promoter who is obsessed with fame and like money. And so the idea of this actor playing that type of character, I can see it because he kind of played a very similar character in Eternals, where he like was an Eternal and he lived forever, and he was a movie star, and he capitalized on being a generational movie star who would put himself into seclusion for some years and then come back as like, oh, I'm his grandson. Like that's really cool. And like it was a way to maintain a life of leisure, kind of like we saw or we would see with the Booster Gold character, like wanting to be important and want to be in the spotlight. Like, so it's cool. I think that those two characters, or that portrayal that he did in Eternals, can like or would have helped him get the role that he got in Booster Gold. And so I think it works. I think it works. I'm very interested to see it. I'm kind of high on that one. I'm very intrigued by that one. But the number one, the most intriguing casting is the most recent casting, Aaron Pierre as John Stewart Green Lantern. No actor has gotten their role based on a more recent job they did than Aaron Pierre. Because if you saw Rebel Ridge, you know that character is very strongly lined up with the John Stewart Green Lantern that we see in a lot of different animated things, as well as the comics. So from what I know of John Stewart Green Lantern from the comics, and I have like just a panel to show here, like he was one of the Green Lanterns when being introduced at the Corps, refused to make himself a mask. And he did this because he was not ashamed of who he was and wanted to show his face, basically saying like, I'm not gonna hide anything, I'm gonna let it all hang out, I'm not gonna hide who I am. That's really cool, and that's also, in my opinion, kind of close to what we saw in Rebel Ridge. Like, I'm going to show you who I am, I'm not going to back down, I'm not gonna cower in front of you. That's Rebel Ridge. The idea of John Stewart, I remember in the most recent animated film, he was like a veteran who came back to his neighborhood and was slightly down on his luck, and I could actually see that also relating to Rebel Ridge. Like, that character who was recently released from the military, incredibly dangerous, very skilled in the hand-to-hand combat, but at the same time maintaining a level of humbleness about himself and following the rules and procedures as long as he could and doing his best to stay within the proper guidelines just out of respect for order to a certain extent. And so you could see that in Rebel Ridge, and it's like I could see those elements in other versions of John Stewart Green Lantern that I've seen in other forms of media. So that to me is probably the most clear casting. I know there were some people in the black communities like, trying to be colorist and like, oh, John Stewart has always been a darker skinned black man and Aaron Pierre is not a dark skinned black man. It's like, I think that does not matter at all. I think that this is a perfect casting for that character just based on the small amount of work that we've seen with that Rebel Ridge film. We've seen a person who is willing to stand up to authority as well as follow rules and procedures with that military background, present himself as a physical presence, all the things that you would want from a John Stewart Green Lantern, and also bucking authority because we're going to see this version of John Stewart Green Lantern opposite of Hal. And the whole idea for years that they've kicked around this Green Lantern show was that Hal was going to be showing John Stewart the ropes, and it was going to be a younger John Stewart, an older version of Hal. So very good that they decided to do all this right now and pick that character because of his portrayal in a movie that kind of lines up with the character that they're going to want him to portray in their universe. I don't have many thoughts about all the other castings, but if you have any thoughts about those castings, you can drop them in the comment section if you've watched to this point. I thank you, appreciate you, and that's all we have for this one, y'all. Enjoy yourself, guard your heart, and go watch something good.